I've watched all 8 episodes, binged them all on the day that the show was released, and I've seen many differing opinions regarding the quality of the show. Some good, some bad, some ugly, and some absolutely downright despicable takes. I'm one of the people who decided to go into it with an open mind. I didn't agree with some of the statements made prior to its release about some changes made, but I thought I can't judge a show based off a few quotes, especially before I've even gotten a chance to see it. And then on the other side of things, there are those who decided that they didn't like the show before they had even watched it. The curse of the live action adaptation has proven to be too painful for them, and they do not want to see another beloved series fall victim to it again. So my point is, with any live action remake or any show in general, you can only really judge it once you've actually seen it, and now I have seen it all, and depending on the copyright, this video will probably be mostly made up of clips from the original cartoon, but here are my thoughts on the Netflix live action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And right away it starts off with a big change, which is that we see the genocide of the air nomads at the hands of Sozin and the Fire Nation. Firstly, just seeing a fully realized air nomad civilization was really cool. The bright colors, the setting looked amazing. And then to the genocide, it didn't bask in the violence of the situation, which I'm happy about, I'm thankful for. Yes, we do see a few people burning alive, but the show doesn't linger on that. It was more so the hopelessness of the situation. The kids that Monk Gyatso was protecting, they die. We know they die, but we didn't have to see that. As soon as we see Monk Gyatso go down, you understand what comes next. Although, what I don't like in this is the manner in which Aang left the air temple. He said that he had to think. So of course it doesn't change the consequences of him leaving, but him running away was a big part of his character, and it comes up again in the story so many times, so I don't see the need for such a change. And then as for the rest of the first episode, it was also a bit of a mixed bag for me. The dialogue was just so weird, like the characters weren't even talking to each other at some points, but directly to the audience. I mean, I feel like we got the intro to the series like 3 different times. A lot of exposition to get us caught up with everything, Gran being the biggest offender here. But on the bright side, I think that this first episode definitely sold me on some of the casting choices, specifically with the actors for Aang, Sokka and Zuko, who I think proved themselves as the chosen actors for their respective roles. I know there were a decent amount of people who didn't like the acting in the show, but from my point of view, I think it was the script that let them down, and I'll get to that, since there's a specific reason why I didn't mention Katara's actress here. Golden Cormier, I think, did a great job, especially in the first few episodes, which is where we see Aang's more childlike side, which kind of just gets lost as each episode comes along. His relationship with Gyatso, I think, was one of the parts where he really shines. When you put it next to the serious tone of the show, you can see him kind of letting his guard down, that sense of relief. And the portrayal of Monk Gyatso himself is one of my favourite parts of this adaptation, just a really comforting feeling whenever he was on screen. And then Sokka's character, the actor Ian, I think got the comedic timing spot on in the show. I know some people weren't a fan of Sokka in this, but I am. The jokes and sarcasm were few and far between though, I will say toned down. But also Sokka was subject to some controversy since they were taking away his character's sexism, one of his key character flaws that he worked through that provided growth. So the route that they took was leaning fully into his warrior protector side, and you know what, I think it was actually alright seeing him stumble through things with Suki, who was another great casting choice. And on a side note, the makeup in this show is really good, although I think some of the wigs could use a little work. But also Sokka and Suki's relationship is progressed more so in the live action than it is in the cartoon up to this point. And that kind of solidifies how fast the story as a whole is going to move. And Zuko. Firstly, I'm happy that the scar is right. I heard that they almost made it smaller, but thankfully it looks good. He is definitely still devoted to finding the Avatar. With the adaptation only being across 8 episodes, it would mean that the beginnings of his character growth would happen quicker, so I was a bit skeptical, but also because his rage, his anger seemed to have been turned down a notch. But I actually think that the change worked, because whether this was intentional or not, you can see the pain and fear more so here from Dallas's acting. He still has his hothead moments, but I think that feeling of him being more scared than anything actually helped. So I think this is one of the very few times where the pace of the show is actually working in its favor. I say very few times because that leads me to the issues that I briefly mentioned before. They said no side quests before the show came out. Aang will be focused on stopping the war. So with the show being more serious in tone and it having a quick pace, I feel like there's not much in the way of relationship building for our main trio, Aang, Sokka and Katara. Like in the cartoon, we see them grow closer to each other, and that is in part thanks to those side quests or side episodes where the focus isn't stopping the war. So in the live action, which is very focused on that serious subject, there's not much downtime for them to talk to each other. It's all business. I mentioned in my video about the original cartoon, they aren't robots that are there solely to move the plot forward, but at times in this adaptation it does feel that way. Like, I just praised a few of the actors and their characters, but that was them individually. Although I should mention that I still did enjoy Zuko and Iroh's relationship. I think that what they added, like the scene of Iroh joining Zuko in his banishment and Luten's funeral, were both great scenes with Leaves from the Vine playing in the background. One thing I am worried about though is that they played Leaves from the Vine a few times in the show, and if it does get a second season, I don't want that soundtrack to be played too often because I don't want it to lose its value or just be used as a quick tearjerker before swiftly moving on. But yeah, I think the relationship between Zuko and Iroh was really good. But back to the seriousness of the show. Of course, the character that this affects the most is Aang, and I said how I think Gordon Cormier did a good job in the role, but the serious tone did not help him at all. Aang is who he is because of his whimsical, childlike attitude, so taking that away was just never going to be a good thing. I think something as simple as him smiling in the background while Sokka was embarrassing himself talking to Suki, that made me smile, so I'm confident that Gordon could have pulled it off. So again, if it does get a second season, I hope we get a more upbeat Aang. And just like the relationships, I don't think that the darker tone is all bad. The stakes are put across really well, first showing the genocide and then throughout the show cutting to the Fire Nation and Ozai, showing them malice did put in perspective what they were up against. But specifically the scene where Iroh is being transported by people who were affected by his actions as general during the war, I thought that was a great scene. These people are all hurt by the thing Aang is trying to stop. A serious tone isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when your character is a fun-loving kid, such a script just seems out of place. And remember when I said that the script doesn't help the actors in their roles? This is where I want to talk about Katara. She doesn't get much to do in the show, outside of her main confrontation with Master Parku in the Northern Water Tribe. She doesn't have anything to struggle to overcome. I mean, it's made so that she almost can't waterbend at the start, which seemed like a good choice, but again, there was no major difficulties in overcoming it, and by the end she's taking a forward role in the defense of the Northern Water Tribe. My favourite scene of Katara is the one where she is arguing with Sokka in the secret tunnels, which showed me that the actress, whose name I won't try to say out of respect, she is capable. I like her one-liner after freezing Jet. She's got the talent, I think, but the writing just doesn't give her much to do or to work with. That's a recurring theme. The actors can do their bit, but they're being let down by the script. But back to the positives, the locations and the visual effects are amazing. I don't know what the budget for this show is, but I think they've done a great job. The bending looks nice, the settings look stunning, the creatures look fantastic. There are moments where you can tell that it's a character in front of a green screen, but given how the rest looks, I'm not gonna hold it against them. Koizilla looked better than I thought. The costumes, I know that some people have a problem, and justifiably so, with the wardrobe looking too clean, too fresh, but that's never really been something that's got to me. And Cole the Face Stealer absolutely stole the show. I was constantly lowering my gaze to avoid getting jump scared, and the integration of the Mother of Faces was a nice touch. I loved seeing Aang interacting with his past incarnations, you know, him receiving guidance from the other avatars was always fun in the original, and it's great here. Kyoshi being Kyoshi, she really needs no introduction, a 7-foot tall woman, and she looks to be 7 feet tall here. And the expansion on Avatar Kuruk's role was a welcome surprise, although I feel like Roku, who was one of my favourite characters in the cartoon, kind of got the short end of the stick, both in terms of his wig and beard and his screen time. The show as a whole is a big mixed bag. Some changes that worked, some that didn't. I haven't seen the movie, so I can't compare it to that, but based on other people's thoughts, I'm gathering it is better than the movie. Maybe I'll watch it and make a video on it. But let me say this. As with most live action adaptations, there are changes made to the characters to make them a better fit for the medium or the tone that the adaptation is going for. We see it here with Aang, with Sokka, and with someone I haven't mentioned yet, Bumi. In this live action, he still has his eccentric nature, but a big change is that he is angry at Aang. He is hurt from the 100 years of war that he has had to lead people through. Having such a character once scarred by war isn't a bad thing, but that's not really who Bumi is in the cartoon. So I ask this question: when does a character adaptation go from having just made some changes to them just being a different character? Where would you draw the line? So that's my review, my view from a critical standpoint of this show. But to end on a high note, despite the show's shortcomings in some big areas, I still had fun. I don't really do ratings, so I'll put it like this. Am I eagerly awaiting an announcement saying a second season is on the way? Not really, no. But if one is announced, will I watch it when it comes out? Yes, 100%. So that has been Netflix's live action adaptation of Book 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender.